This meeting is being recorded.
All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to RVA Rapid Transit's Transit Talk. This is a monthly webinar series where we want to keep you informed of anything pertaining to public transportation in the Richmond region, news, and issues affecting it. So we're very thankful that you're joining us here today. My name is Faith Walker. I'm the Executive Director for RVA Rapid Transit. And as many of you know, we are a nonprofit dedicated to advocating and educating for frequent and far-reaching public transportation in the Richmond region. And we focus and do that three ways. We want to see more buses go more places. We want to see folks have dignified places to wait for the bus. And then last but not least, we want to elevate riders' voices in transit planning and decision-making. And so I'm excited today that we have a special guest from the DRPT, Dan, who's going to be sharing with us ways to make transportation in our region more equitable and modernized by the study they just submitted. And so before we do that, I want to do some housekeeping. I just want to make sure that everybody keeps their mics on mute. And also if you have, just to keep down background noise, and if you have any questions, you can place them in the chat or comments. And then last but not least, I also want to say thank you. Thank you to our partners. We could have not done this work without you. So to Bon Secours, the Energy Foundation, Community Foundation, and you, we say thank you. So I want to turn it over to Richard Hankins. He's going to be giving you some transit news. So take it away, Richard. And you're on mute.
All right. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Awesome. Well, I'm Richard. I'm the do the programs and communications for RV Rapid Transit. And we just finished a 5-week course on Mobility University. We had our graduation, and it was a lot of fun. We had one of our students, Linda Brown. She gave the graduate speech. We had about 35 people come. Our keynote speaker was GRTC's Joe Dillard, who's a director of equity and legislative policy for GRTC.
Hey, Richard.
As you can see in the middle panel, we had quite a crowd. I mean, we had friends, family, some of our board, GRTC, multiple representatives came out, and then just transit activists from across the region. We were really happy. And on the right, you can see one of our star students, second from the right, George Sinkler, posing with Faith, Dr. Miller of Virginia Department of Health, and then on the very right, El de la Cancela from Chesapeake Climate Action Network, who was a big partner for us. So we were really happy. It was a lot of fun, and we cannot wait to do it again. In other news, while it's been in the works for a while and floating around, GRTC did publicly release their Essential Transit Infrastructure Plan last month, and we, as you may know, we're trying to get the amount of stops up from 25 to 50% or more. And then if you're more curious, Wyatt Gordon, one of our board members and accomplished journalist, has a great write-up in Greater Washington that just came out this week. GRTC also has a new paratransit provider. And National Express Transit. So we're happy to have them. And they're primarily responsible for caravans, but we're hoping that GRTC is making the right move for that. And then next Tuesday at 8 in the morning, GRTC is having their new next board meeting. And then it's particularly of note because there'll be new members from Richmond and Chesterfield, and that's kind of culminating this big transition of the board that started when Henrico joined the board last April, and they'll be discussing the North-South BRT line. Which brings me back to Faith, who has some really exciting news and a call to action.
Can you hear me, Richard?
Yes.
Can you go back a few slides and show the pictures from Mobility University?
Yes,
there we go.
So this was our graduate speaker, Linda Brown. She was a really great student. And then you can see GRTC's Joe Dillard, the audience, and then one of our other graduates in the hat, George Sinclair. So we were just really happy to have such a great turnout and, you know, to show our pride and for all these students.
All right, great. So with that, for this writer's voice portion, we always like to take a moment to hear from writers, but I want you to join us on next Tuesday to share your support for the North-South BRT. That's going to be presented as a conversation at GRTC's board meeting, and we would love you to participate by giving a public comment. This is actually going to be the first action that our graduates are going to take. And so they're going to be giving a comment in support. What we've done is we've created a talking points document that you can use and then also too, we created a template. So if you need some assistance on how to write a public comment, that's all there. So Tuesday, October 25th, we're going to meet in the parking lot of GRTC's headquarters at 7:45 a.m. If you need any assistance getting there as a bus rider, please contact me, or you can email info@rvarapidtransit.org. And then, but before you submit, if you want to submit in person or read your comment, you can meet us in the parking lot, but all comments, whether you're going to read it in person or not, if you still can submit it and it will be read for you. But you need to submit your comments by Monday, October 24th, 5 p.m. And then to Mike Frontero at GRTC.com. So if you click on those documents there, it'll give you all of this information. So please join us, please write your public comment and make it heard supporting the North-South BRT. So let's move on. I'm so excited to have Dan Sonenklar with us today. Dan serves as a statewide transit planning manager for the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation. In his time with the DRPT, he has overseen the implementation of the Merit Capital Assistance Prioritization process and the development of statewide transit studies and guidelines, and has supported transit planning efforts completed by service providers throughout the state. He currently oversees DRPT capital and technical planning functions. So prior to joining the Commonwealth of Virginia, Dan worked with the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, the City of Tacoma Park, Maryland, and the City of Bogota, Colombia, and as a private sector planning consultant. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan.
Well, thank you, Faith. First of all, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. And can you see my screen that I am now sharing?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. As Faith said, I am Dan Sonenklar. I am a statewide transit planning manager here with DRPT. And today I will be reviewing the final report of the Virginia Transit Equity and Modernization study that we recently completed. A little bit of background on this study. This was a legislatively mandated study. So you will see reference throughout this presentation to the legislation that kind of created the study. It is HJ, or House Joint Resolution 542. And this was a multi-year, multifaceted study that looked at the current state of transit in the Commonwealth with particular attention to two areas. The first was equity of the current system, infrastructure, and access to that system throughout the state. And second was how DRPT can support modernization efforts to make transit throughout the state of Virginia even better than it is today. So this study, with those two things in mind, really presented DRPT with a unique opportunity to examine and evaluate transit statewide in a way that we often do not have the opportunity to do, and engage with nearly all of our transit partners throughout the state, as well as riders, advocacy groups, and others that were involved. So it was quite a big effort, and it was quite a successful effort at that. So with all of that in mind, this slide just gives a quick overview of what I will be covering today. I will start with a quick overview of HJ 542, specifically mentioning the key deliverables that were associated with that piece of legislation. After that, I will highlight our public and stakeholder engagement efforts that occurred throughout the life of the study. Then I'll walk you through some key study findings before I get into the meat of the presentation, which is an overview of the action plan and the recommendations coming out of the final report. Specifically, I'll be highlighting those actions, what those actions mean for transit riders, and also what those actions mean for transit agencies throughout the Commonwealth. Finally, I'll wrap up discussing some next steps and kind of DRPT's plans moving forward. So starting with a study overview, as I mentioned a moment ago, during the 2021 General Assembly session, House Joint Resolution 542 was passed with a wide range of support from interest groups across the Commonwealth. The legislation required DRPT to complete a needs assessment focusing on the equitable delivery of transit service throughout the state of Virginia and how we propose modernizing the system as we have it today. In response, we developed the Transit Equity and Modernization Study to meet the call in a manner that was really reflective of the Virginia communities and the partners that were involved in the creation of the study. The two main deliverables, as listed at the bottom of this slide, were an interim report and the final report. The interim report highlighted key findings that were observed as part of our kind of data collection process, as well as our public engagements throughout the study effort. And then the final report includes 29 targeted recommendations and actions that DRPT and agencies throughout the state can work toward. So within the study, there were several technical transit topics that were called out as part of the legislation and explored. Those technical topics are listed here on the screen. The first is transit accessibility, and this is concepts of access to the transit system and services, as well as how people can use those systems and services to access jobs and opportunities. Another area that we looked at was the adequacy of infrastructure. And this section really concentrated on bus stop and other major infrastructure conditions with customer facilities in mind. We also looked at emerging technologies and how the use of transit and ITS technology is currently deployed statewide, and some of those barriers to implementation of some of those newer solutions to consistent transit issues. We also looked at electrification. We looked at the current state of zero emissions buses in the state. We did some ballpark costing for a statewide transition to electric vehicles and explored some operational considerations of transitioning to electric. We also looked at safety and how agencies are addressing safety statewide in their local jurisdictions, and engagement and governance, where we reviewed how agencies engage riders, how community members are or are not involved with the decision-making process. And we looked pretty deeply here at the makeup of the decision-making bodies of the boards that really guide transit decisions throughout the state. As for the study process, we broke things down into a few different phases. We started off with a quite robust data collection effort last summer, where we assessed existing conditions, collected data and resources on industry best practices, and reviewed research with regard to equity and modernization efforts. We also collected valuable information and input from transit agencies at this time, stakeholders, and riders as well. In the fall, we then focused on identifying needs and opportunities by topic areas, again, soliciting input from our transit partners and riders, but also guided by the robust data that we had collected in the first phase. At the conclusion of the second phase, we submitted the interim study report to the General Assembly, and then shortly thereafter, we began working on the study action plan in the winter and spring of this past year. And finally, late spring and summer, we pulled it all together and we produced the final report. And this is just an image of what that final report looks like. You will find that on our website, as well as the study website. And I will share those links with you at the end of this presentation. So these next couple of slides kind of outline our public and stakeholder engagement in the creation of this plan. Listening to a wide range of voices was really a key component of conducting the study and for developing solutions that reflect the needs and the priorities of transit users across the Commonwealth. The participation plan really focused on creating open and honest dialogue around transit needs, in which diverse perspectives were both encouraged and respected. So you can see in this table, this little illustration here, throughout the study, many stakeholders, including agency staff, community leaders, and technical experts, provided their input through their participation in a transit equity and modernization committee, which we formed as part of the study, as well as technical working groups and agency surveys that were sent out to all of the transit service providers throughout the state. Staff here at DRPT also conducted dozens of agency briefings on the study to solicit input and raise general awareness that the study was going on. Our work team, or our study team, also received input from riders and members of the public through transit rider forums that were held throughout various parts of the study. And in addition to a transit rider story campaign, a public survey, and a virtual forum that was held this past spring. So this input from the transit riding public was really foundational to the developments of the study and is featured throughout the report. And it was extremely important in developing actions that really addressed what we figured to be riders' needs throughout the state. Here is a visual representation of those engagement efforts. The meetings, events, and other touch points were that we organized, engaged various stakeholders and the general public from different income groups, ages, socioeconomic backgrounds, and geographic areas, ranging from the biggest cities in the state to the most rural towns. And you can see that almost all corners of the state are lit up on that map that is illustrating where we got input from. In addition, there were several out-of-state stakeholders and industry partners that were also engaged, which added to the study's diversity of perspectives and really helped us look at what other areas are doing to address some of the issues that were raised. So the following few slides provide an overview of some of the major study findings that advise the action plan. And I was going to suggest that since we have a small group here, if you all do have questions as I go through any of this, I think it would be appropriate if you all indicated that you did have a question through the chat box, and I will try to address it as we go through. I'll also take questions at the end of this, but if there's anything that needs further clarification as I'm clicking through these slides, please just let me know. So within the topic areas of accessibility and adequacy of infrastructure, a number of critical needs and opportunities were identified through our data collection process and through our discussions with stakeholders throughout the state. So the first one here is that equity and accessibility must be more heavily considered in guidance, requirements, and funding programs for transit agencies. So while transit is operated at the local level, the Commonwealth of Virginia sets policies that agencies need to follow and administers grant funding programs that agencies can participate in. So that's really where we have the potential at DRPT to impact transit at the local level through changes in those policies and requirements as part of those funding programs. In addition, within these study areas, we found that many bus stops are poorly placed and not well connected to sidewalks, and that basic transit infrastructure is inconsistent throughout the state. So here, riders face barriers when getting to bus stops, including a lack of this connectivity to sidewalks and crosswalks. But the idea of poor placement of bus stops along streets is really something that we can impact through better planning and better kind of requirements around our funding programs. For those that rely on transit and have really no other options, these accessibility deficiencies lead to not only an unpleasant experience, but also unsafe conditions in many circumstances. In addition, we found that there's an increasing interest in piloting zero fare service to overcome those barriers to transit access. Roughly half of Virginia's transit agencies have expressed interest in implementing zero fare transit on a long-term basis. And we did note that 11 agencies have already fully or partially implemented fare-free or zero fare transit as a response to changing and shifting policies during the COVID-19 pandemic. And many of those agencies have continued with their fare-free programs since things have gone somewhat back to normal. And the final bullet here is that the availability of transit in Virginia is high, but gaps still exist. Across the state, there's approximately 1 million people that we have determined through our technical analysis need fixed route transit services, but currently do not have access to it. In addition, there's about 570,000 jobs that should be served by fixed route transit, but are currently not. And so expanding the reach and increasing the frequency of transit services that are available will improve access to jobs and opportunities of all of the people that live in Virginia. So within the emerging technologies and electrification topic areas, we considered how the Commonwealth is doing in using emerging technologies like autonomous vehicles, microtransit, contactless payments, real-time vehicle tracking, and driver assistance technology. We also considered where the Commonwealth is in electrification efforts of transit vehicles and use of zero emissions technology throughout the provision of transit services. So the two takeaways here were that there's a strong interest in transitioning to zero emissions fleets across the state, and that there are unique opportunities or needs and barriers to adopting new and emerging technologies amongst our transit agencies. Several agencies in Virginia are actively deploying zero emissions buses, and many, many more are interested. While funding opportunities continue to be available at both the state and federal levels, to access those funding programs, agencies need to define their goals and policies to guide the transition process. And so what we found in this study is that we've made good progress towards moving towards electrification and towards implementing emerging technologies. But there's, of course, room for improvement. In Virginia, we've done a lot of work with automated vehicle testing, with microtransit deployments, and with driver assistance technology. However, we also found that only 8% of agencies in the state use contactless fare payments. 34 use real-time vehicle tracking, and only 5 have implemented mobility on-demand services. So there's a lot of opportunity for agencies to adopt these new technologies with some guidance from the state. All right. So within the safety topic area, the review of existing conditions showed that transit is, of course, amongst the safest ways to travel, but similar to the other areas, there's room for improvement. According to research by many organizations, but notably by the American Public Transit Association, the chances of being involved in a crash decreased by more than 90% when taking public transit instead of driving. So in other words, travel by transit is approximately 10 times safer than by automobile. Despite this, transit riders have several personal safety and crime concerns, and which presents an opportunity for agencies and DRPT to better communicate how transit provides safe travel options and to coordinate with local jurisdictions to increase security at and near stops in an effort to deter crime and to improve the perception of safety of those that are accessing the system. Transit agencies across Virginia also recognize and value the importance of engagement with their communities. So although transit riders have opportunities, we found that those opportunities to be a part of the decision-making process are limited. Providing consistent methods for formal rider involvement and also mechanisms to ensure that those voices and needs of the most vulnerable communities are represented will always contribute to more equitable outcomes. So DRPT is looking at ways to improve our guidance and our policies to encourage this kind of behavior from boards and decision-making bodies. In addition, study-wide for the Commonwealth, DRPT, and all of the local transit agencies, in order for all of us to have accurate, up-to-date information, robust data needs to be produced. But in addition to be produced, it needs to be maintained and then tracked across all industry focus areas. So there's a lot of opportunities to enhance and expand the collection and availability of data on a statewide basis, but also at the local level to support that decision-making process. So moving on to the action plan, this is where we started to answer questions about what all of these findings mean to riders throughout the state and to agencies. To this end, we used the needs and opportunities that were identified in the study findings and the interim report to guide the development of that action plan. So this part of the study really highlights work that DRPT and local agencies can undertake to modernize transit, expand access to transit, and opportunities and jobs throughout the Commonwealth. A subset of these key recommendations are illustrated on the following slides, but there are more in the final report. So I encourage everybody to take a look at that. It is on our website, the DRPT website, which is provided at the end of this presentation, but I will also drop some links into the chat boxes here as well. So several of the study's actions aim to improve transit agency processes that center on the needs of transit riders. On the screen here, the various call-out boxes that you see are some of the actual recommendations that are included in the study. So these actions include developing best practices to coordinate land use and transit planning, which we found through our outreach efforts was significantly lacking throughout various jurisdictions in Virginia. In addition, these actions include providing technical guidance and best practices for monitoring and reporting infrastructure performance. As a side note here, one of the activities we completed as part of the interim study report was a bus stop assessment. So in the state of Virginia, there's over 15,000 stops that serve all of our agencies throughout the state. And so staff here at DRPT and our consultants sampled almost 1,000 of those to look at ADA compliance, sidewalk connectivity. We inventoried shelters, lighting, benches, and other basic infrastructure, and also made note of the general condition of those bus stops. So that analysis advised this section here. The actions also include developing standards and metrics to measure how transit is providing access to jobs and opportunities. So as part of this assessment, we did a baseline analysis of transit access to jobs and opportunities. And so this action in this part of the report takes us a step further and recommends that DRPT regularly perform this type of analysis to see if we're making progress statewide. And finally, the actions included identifying transit safety training opportunities for staff. In talking to our agencies, we heard a need for more and better trainings with regard to safety. There's many resources out there with regard to safety. So through this action, we'll link our agencies to those opportunities that exist and hopefully seek some new ones. All right. In an effort to improve the rider experience through increased use of technology solutions, DRPT is recommending actions that focus also on implementing regular technology assessments, developing resources to evaluate fare collection policies and practices, establishing goals for zero emission transit vehicles and plans to convert agency vehicles, and expanding use of data standards such as the GTFS or General Transit Feed specification, which is what Google Maps uses to include fixed route transit schedules in their various products. So with regard to implementing regular technology assessments, that action really speaks to the fact that we, and I'm referring to DRPT and our transit agencies, need to do a better job of inventorying existing transit technologies, reviewing the needs, and then identifying market-ready solutions that are kind of ready to go and ready to be deployed to address issues that come up. In the reevaluation of fare collection policies and practices, specifically, this action is aimed at helping agencies evaluate their local costs and benefits of transitioning to zero fare models. Excuse me. Under the zero emissions transit vehicles and plans to convert agency fleets, for this action, DRPT has already started developing a scope of work for a statewide low and no emissions bus transition plan, or a roadmap that will help guide agencies to do so if they are interested in converting their fleets. And we anticipate beginning that study in early 2023. There's clearly a growing interest in electrification amongst our agencies around the state, but many of those agencies need help navigating the complicated processes of accessing funding, of how to upgrade their utilities to support that, and of how to change their operational practices to ensure that they are able to keep their vehicles charged and running. And then under the expanding the use of data standards such as GTFS. A couple of years ago, DRPT started doing work on this when we received a discretionary grant to build a statewide GTFS data set. So this action kind of builds on that by piloting projects to have agencies more widely adopt GTFS real time, which allows you to track bus movements as they are serving the transit systems that they're operating within. And then GTFS Flex as well, which is for on-demand services like microtransit. So yeah, within the technology area, there is a lot of room for improvement. Enhancing the overall customer experience of transit riders is also a strong focus of our recommended actions in this study. So here, DRPT is recommending actions that focus on developing best practices for transit safety and engaging local partners. We've already done a lot of this kind of work, but we will be expanding on how transit agencies can work with local law enforcement and other partners to enhance transit safety at the local level. In addition, these actions include providing guidance on crime prevention, as well as rider safety and etiquette. Transit agencies have asked for templates and resources for developing codes of conduct and rider etiquette policies that will improve safety and comfort on our buses and trains throughout the state. In addition, the actions include pursuing safety measures with a focus on transit operators and staff. So this is a reaction to actually a nationwide uptick in safety incidents between riders and bus operators or drivers. Since the pandemic, there's been an industry-wide increase in such incidents. So this action will better prepare and educate our agencies and the drivers and other operational service providers on what they can do to prevent those kinds of issues from arising. In order to expand rider involvement in transit decision-making, DRPT is also recommending actions that focus on developing a public engagement handbook to outline techniques for more inclusive public engagement at the local level. This month, in fact, we'll be asking the Commonwealth Transportation Board to take action on revised guidelines for our transit strategic plans, which includes enhancements to our public engagement requirements. So we've already really started to put some of this work into place, but we also want to develop a handbook on effective public engagement strategies for agencies and other localities to use to better or more responsibly incorporate community input into the actual decision-making process. In addition, these actions are aimed at encouraging local transit agencies to create rider advisory councils. Through our outreach efforts, we found that only about a third of the agencies in the state currently have such groups to advise policy boards on rider needs and what their riders would like to see. So these groups we know can be very effective in advocating for rider needs, but at the same time, they need to be codified into an agency's governing policies, and the purpose and expectations need to be clearly articulated in order for a rider advisory council to really be effective. And there's some really interesting examples nationwide of such kinds of advisory councils advising decision-making bodies that we would like to reflect in such guidance. Also, in an effort to promote higher quality transit infrastructure, we are recommending actions that focus on developing technical guidance on bus stop design. This will update some guidance that DRPT created over 10 years ago, so we're going to be refreshing those with new guidelines. But also, more importantly, we want to provide guidance on how to prioritize infrastructure improvements leading to or around bus stops, such as sidewalks and other kind of connectivity infrastructure. Here, this is a much more complicated process because it includes many different stakeholders and agencies and partners to really get coordinated. So we want to work closer with our partners to better prioritize projects that improve bus stop conditions and offer local transit planners with resources on how they can best coordinate these efforts with VDOT, the Virginia Department of Transportation, MPOs, which are metropolitan planning organizations, and also other various local agencies that are involved in planning and construction efforts. Again, a side note here, we also found as part of this study, but in general, that the permitting and approval process for installing bus shelters and benches on state-owned right-of-way is extremely complicated and time-consuming for everybody to navigate. And so we've been working behind the scenes already to identify solutions that will hopefully streamline the permitting and approval process. And this is taking a lot of coordination with VDOT and the Virginia Department of General Services, who's also involved in that process. And finally, for areas and agencies in which new or enhanced transit services are warranted, DRPT is recommending actions that focus on identifying areas with unmet demand for transit services. So here, we are going to help agencies identify service gaps, whether that be through the transit planning tool that was mentioned earlier that we used as part of this study, or something else. And then we want to work with those agencies on developing services to meet those needs through our various programs, such as technical assistance, offering assistance directly on funding opportunities at the state and federal level, and things along those lines. In addition, actions in the plan focus on allocating funding to prioritize transit expansion and enhancements to underserved areas and populations. So DRPT already offers a demonstration program, for example, for new and expanded service. But here we're going to look at how we can incorporate the need to provide such service to underserved populations into our evaluation process to really make these recommendations more actionable through our various touch points with the agencies that operate in the state of Virginia. So I just went over how the action plan benefits transit riders, but it also has a number of benefits and improvements for transit agencies. And many of those benefits are highlighted here on this slide. So one of those is that implementing these actions will lead to more informed decision-making at the local level, as agencies will have access to better data and be more plugged into the needs of their riders. These actions will also foster more efficient allocation of resources, better matching of resources with needs, and hopefully increase coordination with partners. We want to make sure that our transit agencies have shared knowledge and access to industry best practices in order to really address these equity concerns and to address goals of modernizing our system statewide. In addition, some of the benefits to agencies include the fact that monitoring performance and measuring progress is something that we want in place or to place emphasis on. And we believe that this will lead to better decision-making. The plan also raises awareness of new funding opportunities for agencies to pursue, whether that's through the federal government or through the state. And then ultimately, we do believe that the implementation of these recommendations will ensure better transit outcomes for our agencies, not just the riders. So moving forward, DRPT is going to use this final report as kind of a blueprint for helping transit agencies and for making transit more useful for riders. The final report document, which is on our agency's website and also there's a study website, shows a listing of each of those recommended actions and the associated study finding or need that's being addressed, as well as a lead agency in charge of kind of implementing that action. You will notice that DRPT is listed as the lead agency on most of the actions, but coordination with partner agencies will be key to, of course, successful implementation of these actions as well. Such partners that I keep mentioning include local transit agencies, other state agencies, technology providers, stakeholders and advocacy groups, local governments, consultants, and many, many more that are involved in the transit industry statewide. So the study's final report does represent the conclusion of this planning process, which has been supported by a number of preceding documents and reports, all of which are available on our website. And as I mentioned, we do encourage you to review these documents, especially that full report, which includes details on all the action items. And in closing, the final report was submitted to the General Assembly in late August, so the study itself has officially concluded. Now we have the important task of implementing these difficult and complicated recommendations in partnership with agencies and partners throughout the state. Future steps to accomplish this will include the identification of discretionary funding opportunities to support all of these recommended actions, and also identifying key partners to help advance those recommendations as well, outside of our official processes. We'll also need to work closely with leaders across Virginia and maintain a commitment to improving transit in Virginia, and look for support from local and regional partners to accomplish these goals. And then lastly, but certainly not least, we want to measure success. So DRPT will continue to monitor and evaluate our progress on these actions in the coming years through technical analyses and through continued discussions with our various transit partners throughout the state. So that brings us to the end of my presentation, and I do see that some action in the chat box here, and I'm sorry I did not see those come through as I was speaking, but I'm happy to turn it over to all of you for questions.
Well, since we have an intimate group, thank you so much, Dan, for that presentation. I think Suzanne asked, has GRTC indicated interest in zero emissions? Do you have any info or insight on that?
I know GRTC is pretty dedicated to their compressed natural gas propulsion technology, which is considered a low emissions technology. I believe they are exploring other options as well, but I'm not an authority on GRTC's current thinking when it comes to electric or other zero emissions vehicles.
Yeah, and I think that one of the last transit talks that we invited GRTC on board on conversations is definitely they're interested. It's just finding technology that lasts, batteries that last longer than what is currently out on the market. I think that was some barriers for GRTC implementing electric buses or zero emissions. So now, because we do have an intimate group, let's open up the line. So if you have any questions, comments, I invite you to do so right now.
I have one, Dan. And thank you for presenting. So there were quite a few action items across, all the different sectors. And for a small organization like ours, we only have so much capacity to advocate for things. Is there any sort of prioritization system or any way to make sense of, okay, here's 10 good ideas, which ones are the best to focus on with a limited amount of time and resources?
I mean, it's a great question, but I mean, so we're always in this space as kind of, a state oversight agency, and also an agency that's trying to guide statewide policy on this, that we want to make recommendations that help agencies, but we don't want to necessarily tell them what their number one priority should be, or what any one given locality, what their priority needs to be. That does need to come from a local level through advocacy and conversations, and through the local kind of political economy that exists in a given place. So at this point, there is not a list of actions that we want to see people prioritize. Now, once you get into those actions, you will see, as I mentioned, that DRPT is the lead agency on a number of those. And so we're currently in a process of trying to take all of these kind of disparate actions and try to really kind of categorize them and prioritize them for our purposes as well. And so those DRPT-led ones will slowly start to roll out as we make progress towards implementing the actions that are recommended. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think I can say what would be the biggest priority for the Richmond metro area, for example.
That's okay. I'm not trying to put you on the spot like that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, and Lisa asked a question, when will GRTC's board vote on the funding for the transit infrastructure? So I know GRTC has voted to adopt their infrastructure plan moving forward. So I hope that answers your question. They've already voted on that. I'm not quite, if you have any more questions about that, I'd love to hear you ask if you need more details about that. Dan, do you have any feedback on that?
Give me for 1 second. No, I'm sorry. I do not have feedback on that.
Mm-hmm. Richard?
I don't know that all the money's been
Allocated as of yet. Mm-hmm. So I
um,
think the only thing they've done now is the board has voted to move forward with, I guess, committing to that new infrastructure plan, but I don't think they figured out where all the funds are coming from. Any other questions? I had one for you, Dan. Can you identify some cities who have great examples of transit advisory groups? I know GRTC's Transit Advisory Group has been dormant for the last 3 years due to COVID and a number of other reasons. RVA Rapid Transit right now, we're in the works with speaking with GRTC to start that back up. But if there's any cities that we can look to, let us know.
Yeah, so I don't have a good list of cities that are doing this. I know from my experience in the DC metro area when I worked up there, WMATA has a very engaged and very active kind of rider advocacy group. But also where I used to work at COG had a few different advocacy groups for various different groups of people that were accessing the transit system. I used to oversee one called the Access for All Committee that had representation from communities of all sorts in the DC metro area. And the reason why that one worked where I was that they reported directly to the board, the decision-making body, in every single meeting. And they were part of that meeting as one of the first 2 items on the agenda. And so every time something would come up, their opinion would be heard. And so we can certainly provide you all with some other examples. I'm sorry, I do not have a long list of them right now. But I think just our neighbors up north have a couple of good examples of this as well.
Yeah, and Lisa mentioned Hampton Roads has a good one. I reached out to their group, and yes, they do have an up and running one. So Jason writes, your note about worries of feelings of safety around bus stops. Can you elaborate on your suggestions to increase security around bus stops to reduce these feelings? How does this relate to calls from low-income communities and communities of color that they are over-policed? Can you explain the action plans and observations relating to this?
Certainly, I can speak to that at least a little bit. So this recommendation isn't necessarily calling for more police presence in these areas, but rather trying to influence behavior through the design of the infrastructure that is deployed throughout the state. So there's a lot that upgraded amenities and infrastructure around bus stops and stations can do to provide that kind of feeling of safety. In addition to, in certain instances, cameras and other kinds of passive techniques for looking out for rider safety have been helpful.
And better lighting as well.
And that was, yeah. Exactly. You took the words out of my mouth. And yeah, really one of those key amenities around a stop or a station is lighting. And not just lighting right at the stop, lighting along the entire route to access that stop. And so a lot of that, it's like these recommendations are really focused on those kind of infrastructure improvements. And we did not really weigh into the territory of policing. Now, with incidents, often the police do get involved, and there are some best practices that can be disseminated out to our agencies that people follow. But yeah, we're really concentrated on the infrastructure side of things.
Great. Well, we have time for one more question, if there are any. And Dan, if you could stop sharing your screen so we can go to the next slides, if there aren't any more questions. This is a great study. Thank you so much. And it gives our region an opportunity to, so in your professional opinion, what is the most valuable finding from this work and this study? This is coming from Lauren.
In my professional opinion, oh man, I think one of the the largest takeaways from the study was the sheer number of people and jobs that currently do not have access to fixed route transit, but through our approach to this, we're determined to meet the kind of population density and activity density requirements, or not requirements, but thresholds that would support transit. And so I think this is the first time that I think DRPT has ever done an analysis of this sort on a statewide basis to really try to gauge demand and supply and identify those areas where supply is just simply lacking. And not to get too into the weeds of this, but we looked at like areas that were also underserved, so that would have a high number of people and jobs, but had very limited transit access in determining some of those figures. And so I think there's large gaps in service provision, or like where service is located, that can certainly be filled. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you, Lauren, for that question. So I just want to thank everyone for participating today. While it's exciting to see that the DRPT, and shouts out to Delegate Dolores McQuinn, who pushed this legislation to happen in our state. And so this is really exciting that we're seeing studies and findings matching the work that RVA Rapid Transit is doing right now, elevating riders in transit decision-making and pushing transit advisory groups. So thank you so much for that information. I also, before we go, I want to invite you to some events that we have coming up. We are doing another public comment workshop. We had a great turnout for our public comment workshop. This is to help you learn how to draft a comment, and then also make your voice heard. And then also this is the opportunity for you guys to advocate for free fare. So this board meeting, GRTC will be discussing North-South BRT. And then next board meeting, it will be conversations about extending zero fare or what to do. And so this is important that you participate in these next two board meetings, using your voice, using your public comment, and we want to help you do that. And so this taking place Wednesday, November 9th at the Richmond Public Library main branch in the Gelman Room. We have two options for you. So if you choose to come with us in person, we have a printer right there where we'll be printing off and typing up your comment for you. And then if you are unable to visit us in person, we will be doing an online version. And so please register and join us. And then you can also get registration information by visiting the RVA Rapid Transit website. Coming up November 16th. So this is going to be, we're not going to have a transit talk webinar, but we're going to do it live and we want you there. And so we're inviting you to join us to Richmond by Bus video premiere. This is a short video that we've gotten a grant from the Virginia Department of Health to show. It's only 4 minutes, but it just talks about what it's like using public transportation in the Richmond region. Once we watch it, we'll have a short discussion, and then afterwards you can join us for drinks and live music upstairs. This is going to take place at Common House, is 303 West Broad Street. And let me drop the registration link in the chat for you. And so we would love to have you there. Please invite folks. It is 21 and up, only being because Common House Social Club is for 21 and up during the week. So please, please, please join us. And then if you want access to tickets or flyers, we're going to be printing some out. And so you can contact myself or Richard if you will be willing to share this. We want to pack the place out. And so we need your help to do that. It's important that people from all over understand what it's like to use public transportation and partner with us to make it better in the region. And then last but not least, I want to say take action. So moving forward, we ask you to take action. You can support transit by riding the bus. That's the first thing you can do. And then adopt a stop. We have an adopt a stop program where you can adopt a stop for 1 year, picking up trash and litter around a particular stop to make riders' experiences better. And then also beautify your community. So you can reach out to Richard or myself if you're interested, you or your social group is interested in adopting a stop. And then share your story. Public comments are coming up. And so we want to help you do that. And so by you taking action, a clear action is to share your stories and use your voice during public comment at GRTC's meetings. And so please join us next week, next Tuesday for public comment, or participate in our public comment workshop. And then last but not least, donate. Private donations and support from you helps us continue to do the work. And so we would ask you that you can continue to donate and support the work that we do. So until next time, well, until November 16th, we will see you at Common House for our next transit talk. Thank you so much for joining us and have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Dan.